Hi, it's Nick Burke here again from Property for Profit. Congratulations, you've decided to find out how to get not one, but two National Rental Affordability Scheme payments on one property. That's $200,000 in tax-free money from the government over 10 years. Very few people know about this, but there are investors who are cashing in on this right now. It's not illegal or immoral, and it's not a trick or a loophole. It's just a fully legitimate government-approved incentive that hardly anyone knows about. Even most sophisticated investors who know about NRAS already, including people who've invested in NRAS properties. And by the way, if you're unfamiliar with NRAS, just email us and we'll send you all the information you need to know to find out the basics about this lucrative scheme. So the nuts and bolts of NRAS are this. Firstly, you drop your rent by 20 or 25% on a new property. And you get $100,000 in tax-free money from the government for your trouble over 10 years, which is $10,000 per year. We're using rough figures here and round figures. It's actually a little bit more than that, but we'll be conservative. You rent the property to a key worker. This means not a millionaire, not someone on welfare, just someone who's employed in between. But if you want to get double this and get $200,000 in tax-free money paid over the same 10-year period, then there are 6 criteria that you need to know. So let's have a look at each of them. Firstly, it goes without saying that the property needs to be NRAS compliant. This means that it needs to be new and it needs to have not been lived in before. It needs to be in an area that the government has determined there is a need, and it needs to be from a developer who's been approved to create a certain number of new dwellings for the NRAS market, and the rent needs to be discounted by the 20 or 25%. This is the basics. There are a few more criteria associated with NRAS, but I won't go into great detail now because if you're looking at a property, it will either be eligible for NRAS or it won't be, and you'll know because whoever is selling it will tell you. For example, of all the properties that we're involved with, we'll be able to tell you straight away which ones are NRAS compliant and which ones are not. And specifically, to get 2 NRAS payments on one property, there firstly needs to be 2 separate lockable entrances so that a tenant can go into their property without needing to go through someone else's property. So for instance, a granny flat where you have to walk through someone else's lounge room to get into it would not be eligible. It needs to have its own bathroom, it needs to have its own kitchen, it needs to have its own bedroom, and it needs to have its own living space. It doesn't need to have its own laundry. This can be shared, but be careful buying properties with shared laundry facilities. Not for the sake of their NRAS compliance, but because properties with shared laundry facilities probably won't be the ones that are going to achieve you the best capital growth. Stay focused on the capital growth and regard the NRAS payments as just a way of making the property cash flow neutral. Or in the case of double NRAS properties, making them considerably cash flow positive, whilst over the long term, your property will rise in value. Shared garden and barbecue and recreation facilities are also okay, so this is mainly relevant for townhouses and apartment complexes. So what does this mean? Well, it means you have 3 options. There are 3 possible ways in which you can get a double NRAS payment. The first is with a granny flat. A granny flat that obviously meets the conditions. The second was with a duplex that meets the condition. And the third is with a dual key apartment that meets the conditions. Now, a word of warning on each. Be careful with granny flats because in many areas you're not allowed to build them, and in other areas you're only allowed to rent them to family members. So this would mean they wouldn't be NRAS compliant. Be careful with duplexes as well. You want to make sure you're not paying too much for them, and you want to make sure they're in good areas. And it can be a fine line between balancing these 2 factors. Lastly, we have dual key apartments. You need to also be careful with these too because most dual key apartments are in holiday resorts and they're for short-term holiday accommodation. So again, this wouldn't be so suitable for NRAS. Usually the configuration of these is a 1-bedroom apartment on one side with a motel room on the other side with a wall down the middle and accessible through separate doors. Now I wouldn't buy one like that because a motel room is not really going to attract a good long-term tenant. Motel rooms also don't usually have kitchens, so that would make them ineligible. But there are some configurations that do work with NRAS very well, as there are for duplexes and granny flats. So you have 3 options, but you have to be careful which of these options you choose, as there are some traps to be aware of. Now here at Property for Profit, we've refined a 21-point criteria which we use to assess all double NRAS properties. We then go out and search for double NRAS properties that meet these criteria. Let me tell you, NRAS properties themselves are very rare. More than 99% of all properties that are sold don't meet the criteria. And of the remaining 1%, or less than 1%, 99% of those have only one NRAS entitlement on them. So properties with a double NRAS entitlement are as rare as hen's teeth. So then, applying our 21-point filter refines those properties even further. In fact, at any one time, there's only ever a maximum of a handful of properties that meet these criteria in the whole of Australia. Sometimes there are none, and our customers who've booked in for one have to wait. So what we've developed is a process that will enable investors who are interested in securing one of these properties to be able to get access to them. If you're interested in finding out if a double NRAS property is right for you, just put your details in the box to the right. What's going to happen is one of our specialist double NRAS consultants will be in touch with you and will talk to you about how one of these properties may suit you. They'll start by making sure you can get the finance. And then they'll help you to work out the cash flows so you can see exactly how cash flow positive a particular property will be for your circumstance. They'll work through a worksheet that looks something like this. And here's an example that we did for one of our investors with one particular property recently, a positive cash flow of over $9,000 per year. This will be, of course, in addition to the capital growth that you'll achieve. So if you think one of these properties may be out of your reach, you'd be surprised, because we have single NRAS properties on which the cash flows are almost as high, starting from even less than $300,000. So put your details in the box to the right if you want to get started and find out if this opportunity is right for you.